When you don't need an answer, you'll be days like this. When you don't need a chance, you'll be days like this.
You're listening to Talk Sport. This is White and Sawyer. Hugh Wisencroft and Simon Jordan are with you for the next couple of hours. Plenty for us to discuss this hour as well. Next up, we'll be talking about Newcastle United, but Wilfried Zaha's also on the menu. We'll be live in Germany with Sam Matterface as we look ahead to Wolves against Sevilla in the Europa League this evening. And what about the financial chaos for clubs due to coronavirus? That towards the end of the hour as well. Plenty for us to get through. But next up, it is that Newcastle takeover saga, that money coming from PIF, from Saudi Arabia, didn't get over the line for whatever reason. We don't really know exactly the details why, and that's because there hasn't been a statement from the Premier League. Newcastle fans believe the Premier League should have been open and transparent and should have told them exactly why this deal didn't happen. But we know from one side, the prospective new owners pulled out. But was that the Premier League's fault? We're yet to know. Let's speak to Steve Wraith, host of the NUFC Matters podcast. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Morning, guys. How are you doing?
Very well. But I've got to say, when it comes to this thing with Newcastle United fans and the Premier League, I don't quite get it. I can understand there is a need for transparency. Maybe the Premier League should be more open, but one side pulled out of the deal. And for that reason, surely you should be asking the people who pulled out exactly why they're no longer interested in buying Newcastle.
I think what we're seeing here is a bit of brinkmanship. I think anybody who's been involved in business, I am, and I know Simon has, quite successfully. I think that's what we're seeing at the minute. I think this is all tactics and all part of the game. Obviously, I can't categorically prove that, but it would appear that one side has walked away. Theoretically, that would mean the deal is over. But, there's been no confirmation really from PIF, who, of course, would be the majority shareholders of the takeover, went through to say that, they have actually pulled away from the table. So is this a little bit of brinkmanship? Is this for NDAs to be broken temporarily so that one side of the story can come out? And, has that been quite a clever move, which is now shown that, fan pressure could probably play its part. And I think, that to me is what's happened. Newcastle United fans, after 17 weeks of waiting, have now reacted in the only way that they know how, by, essentially, contacting the Premier League and demanding answers. And I think, the pressure which has, resulted in 100,000 or over 100,000 people signing a petition, and of course, over 6,500 letters going out to politicians, of which, I think 30 MPs have now responded. I think that kind of pressure has worked. And I've also noticed that, various Newcastle fan groups have been essentially badgering, shall we say, on social media, various Premier League sponsors. So it's been interesting to see the developments. Will it make any difference? I suppose is the big question. One would hope that at least the Premier League would come out and say something. Obviously, the football ombudsman now has been, quite proactive, come back with a few replies that I've seen to various fan groups and said that, they will contact the Premier League and ask them to make some kind of statement. So we wait with bated breath.
Yeah, perhaps. But Steve, let me ask you, look, there have been many, many false dawns at Newcastle United before. I've seen the petitions online. I've seen some of the things that fans have been saying on social media and the pressure that is being applied. But I've got to say, is the only reason this is different because it was basically the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? This thought of so much money. There was talk of Cavani, great players, Draxler from all over Europe immediately coming through the door. Is it just because this one felt a bit different that Newcastle United fans are more angry because you've missed out on these takeovers many times?
I think the key to this one is that we know Mike Ashley wants to sell. I mean, we're living in unprecedented times with COVID. I think the situation is that in the past, these takeovers have indeed been fakeovers. Really, for whatever reason, Mike Ashley has chosen to wind the fan base up and say that he was going to sell the football club. They've all proved to be false dawns. And this one is genuine. COVID has certainly changed.
Is that not, though, Steve, sorry to cut across you, is that not really because the deals that were put in place by the Peter Kenyans of the world that couldn't raise the money and the Amanda Staveleys of the world that couldn't raise the money and do the deals at those particular times were as much the driving force behind it?
I think the Peter Kenyon one was certainly a fakeover. I think there was connections there, certainly behind the scenes with, with Mike Ashley's team. I think that Peter came forward at the right time to help an old mate, if you like. I think with Amanda, I think the key in 2017, 2018 was that, she definitely felt that the deals that they offered were the right deals, but unfortunately Mike Ashley didn't, and perhaps he wasn't ready to sell the club then. Maybe he thought that there was a better offer out there, but it didn't materialise. All good businessmen are going to try and get a better offer, out there. They're going to play.
What do you think, Steve, is the purpose then of who's creating downward pressure on this transaction? You're suggesting, I'm making an observation, and I'm not criticising it at all, Steve, that potentially this is a negotiating technique, right? Ashley's got the dough from this transaction. I know there was rumours around that he was up in the price, and Amanda dropped some little intellectual bombs in that he tried to add different price parameters around the deal at the back end of it. But Mike's got the price that he wants for the transaction. The Saudi Arabians are prepared to pay the transactional price. Mm-hmm. So where is this negotiating technique coming in to try and leverage the Premier League into accepting a bid? Is that what you're saying the negotiating tactic is?
I think so. I think that the amount of work that has probably gone into this by PCP, by PIF, and by the Reubens, and because of the collective consortium around the table, I think the lawyers will have been very hot on this. I think they will have come up with a strategy because they will have anticipated letters from Amnesty. They will have anticipated letters from Khashoggi. They will have anticipated objections to the Saudis being involved in the Premiership because of the piracy issue.
Which, by the way, Steve, is very real. It's a very real. It's like letting the fox into the hen coop. It's a matter of fact. The World Trade Organization, that, by the way, this country rules might trade under, have come out and said it's a cast iron, stonewall fact that piracy exists under this regime.
The biggest piracy regime in the world.
Yeah, I think ultimately those kind of things can be negotiated. The problem that seems to be the sticking point at the moment is that there seems to have been obviously a change in the owners and directors test. So, of course, 5 years ago, this deal would have, got through no problem. True. Now there seems to be a big change in that, which is typical of Newcastle's look, I've got to say. But the sticking point here seems to be that PIF are basically going to be the 80% shareholders. Yep. What seems to have happened is that Richard Masters in the Premier League seem to have come back and said, well, we want you to say that the Saudi state is actually the owner of the club. They are making the decisions, and that seems to be, for want of a better expression, the straw that's brought the camel's back. Well, and that essentially is why Newcastle fans, really, getting back to the original question, are very disappointed, because it's not the fact that we believe Messi and Ronaldo are suddenly going to be pulling on the black and white strip. It's the fact that, we finally feel as if Mike Ashley is ready to go, and the one deal that's on the table at the minute, and it is the only deal on the table at the minute, is going to collapse, leaving us with a season of Steve Bruce's football again.
But the observation, Steve, is that the Premier League, in some shape or form, and I'm not saying that they are or they aren't, but the observation amongst the Newcastle fan base, from what I can see, is the Premier League are exceeding their reach for a variety of reasons that are not their gift to do. Now, from my point of view, having bought football clubs, having done many deals, if I'm a willing seller and someone's a willing buyer, the last thing I'm going to have someone do that doesn't have the remit to do is to stop me from doing it. So I don't understand on that basis, if there is no reason for the Premier League to be being unreasonable, if the Premier League aren't asking things that are within their gift to ask, why isn't Mike and PIF come out and said, right, that's restraint of trade, we're going to wage a campaign against the Premier League to drag you into the public domain, to make you accountable. But they're not doing it. The Newcastle fan base are doing it, but the buyer and seller seem to be remarkably quiet about what's stopping them from doing the deal that they want to do, as much, if not more, than the Newcastle fans want them to do it.
I personally feel, Simon, that could well be in the arsenal, and that could be a plan B. That's my own opinion, because I feel that because Saudi are, and PIF in particular are going around purchasing a lot of businesses within the business world, then I think this is all about, the way that they look. They certainly don't want to appear aggressive and a bullying nation, do they? So I would imagine that yeah, well, look, that's your opinion, not mine. But I think I personally feel that, you know, they will want to go around and do their business correctly. You don't want to get off to a bad start when you're
Steve, be honest, Steve. If this was a Sunderland takeover, right, and it was happening at Sunderland, you'd sit there and see this regime that has homophobia and murder in its locker and a whole dynamic that is completely unpalatable. You might have a different view about the regime that's coming through the door at Sunderland or a football club that's nothing to do with Newcastle.
Can I say, Simon, though, look, you know, there's a lot being made about Saudi and you know, the various things which you've mentioned there, which I'm not going to repeat. You know, we could say the same about our past. You know, you look at the fact that, you know, we're slave traders in this country. You know, we've just seen recent developments in various parts of the country where statues are being pulled down because
that's past history. We're talking about current events now.
Yeah, but Saudi want to change. They want to change. They are keen to change. They're already making inroads into changing. So, you know, what would have happened if people didn't give Britain a chance to change? You know,
Shall I tell you what I do agree with you on, Steve? I tell you what I do agree with you guys on is I don't like the notion that every single time football fans don't like something that they should have the Premier League or the EFL come out and give a statement about it. But in this instance, given the fact that it is a public domain business, then perhaps the Premier League that caught and wax lyrical about the meaningfulness of fans should come out and say exactly why their reasons are, and maybe that will shut the Newcastle fans down in terms of their rage and outrage about the lack of opportunity for their club to be acquired, or maybe it'll enhance it even more. But I think the notion of the ombudsman is a little bit of a red herring, because I don't think they're going to have a lot of jurisdiction. But I think that probably is where you guys have an element of entitlement, because there's no reason for the Premier League, unless they are really bound by a confidential document that neither the buyer and seller want them to put out in the public domain. And by the way, if the buyer and seller want to sell this football club, why would they have a problem with it?
It's not just, by the way, the Ombudsman who are putting pressure on the Prime Minister too as well, thinks that there should be a statement from the Premier League.
Yeah, well, do you know why? Because he's got his biggest landslide in the North in political terms in the history of the Conservative Party, and he probably wants to keep his currency high in the North.
Probably. Steve Wraith, thank you very much indeed. That's the host of the NUFC Matters podcast. The only thing I would say is very, very disturbed by the sort of feeling around Saudi Arabia that Steve mentioned there, just because, you know, you can't forget the regime and the people from the regime that may have been involved in running the football club, because they're businessmen and they're going to be investors.
It's also not unfair when you look at...
You can't compare.
Man City were acquired by Tiwan Artra, and look at him, and look at some of the things that go on. It's not fair to some extent.
There are people who have done very, very negative things, let me put it in that way, in the world. But we can't talk about slave traders in the British Empire or past and compare that to a takeover happening in 2020. Not really the same. But our thanks to Steve Wraith, as I say, the host of the NUFC Matters podcast. We're going to be talking about Wilfried Zaha next. Stay with us on talkSPORT.
When you don't need an answer, you'll be days like this. When you don't need a chance, you'll be days like this. When you don't get the trade by that old Judas kiss, and I must remember, there'll be days like this.